Fantasy Astrology. I'm Victor, and today we're going to talk about the ancient relationship between astrology and mythology and even religion. Astrology and mythology, or astrology and religion, they have a connection that is ancient, and most, if not all, of ancient civilizations had a religion based on astrology. And if you look at Greek religion, for example, and Greek mythology, which for us is mythology, but for them, I don't even know if the word mythology existed. Maybe it did. But for them, it was a religion. They worshipped these gods. They worshipped Zeus and Apollo and Athena. And these gods represented different components of the human mind. They represented different human archetypes, different human personalities, different qualities that we ourselves embody. And people who study mythology have an easier time understanding astrology, because when we study astrology nowadays, if you pick up a book or you take an online class, it can be more dry. It's sort of drawn the magic out of it, in my opinion. But if you study mythology in order to understand astrology, then you can really tune into it on an intuitive level. If you read these stories about Zeus and Kronos and Aries and Aphrodite, all of a sudden the planets make sense. And the reason that they make sense is because they're inside of us. And every planet corresponds to a different chakra within our bodies. So for the yogis out there, we have 7 chakras. And in Vedic astrology, we look at 7 planets. We can look at the outer planets, but we choose to focus on the 7 planets because there's a direct correlation between those planets and our chakras. And through mythology, we can understand that. Through mythology, we can understand that for thousands of years, and probably even before that, before the ancient civilizations we've even know about, which is called antiquity, the limits of our written history is called antiquity. Even before antiquity, there were probably other civilizations that had the same mythology, because there's something really human about it that transcends time. It transcends state boundaries. It transcends periods of time and periods of history. And for that reason, a lot of the stories about these gods, which correspond to planets, are the same across time and space. In India, the mythology related to Shukra or Venus is the same as the mythology, not the same, but there's strong parallels between that mythology and the mythology in Greece relating to Aphrodite. Of course, from Greece to Rome, it's a short step. The Romans just renamed the Greek deities after planets. So in Rome, Aphrodite became Venus. In Rome, Zeus became Jupiter, etc. And Aries became Mars. And so these cultures had this really intuitive understanding, actually, of the chakras and the planets as representations of the chakras. And so for yogis, for people who have studied yoga and meditation and who have some background in that, it's also easier to understand astrology, because if you have directly experienced or read about the significance of the first chakra, well, you have direct experience of Saturn. If you have direct experience of the second chakra, which is the water chakra of Jupiter, you have direct experience of Jupiter in astrology, and so on. And Mars is the 3rd chakra, the fire center. Venus is the 4th chakra, which is the air. Mercury is the 5th chakra, which is ether, which I understand to be a type of air. It's very subtle, but even more maybe refined than air. The 5th chakra is the moon, the 6th chakra is the moon, which is the counterpart of the 7th chakra, which is the sun. And so if we look at it that way, astrology stops being so abstract and academic and more intuitive. And so throughout history, we've seen these religions based on planets. And it seems weird. Well, planets are so far away. Why were religions based on planets? Well, they weren't really based on planets. They were based on chakras and the projection of those qualities onto the planets, which in a macrocosmic sense represents who we are and the human body. So our solar system is actually a projection of every one of our bodies into a sort of enormous macrocosm. And so gradually this got turned into paganism and was stigmatized by Christianity, but it certainly doesn't have to be. I certainly don't see any contradiction between understanding the chakras and understanding Christianity. I don't know why it was stigmatized, but I don't think it has to be anymore. It's just a way of understanding our subtle body, our spiritual body. And it gives us insight into the real value of astrology, which is not something outside of us, it's about something inside of us, and how, because it's inside of us, we can change it. When we focus on astrology as something in the macrocosm, as something in the solar system, it seems so beyond us, so immovable. And maybe that's one of the root causes of why we have this deterministic vision of astrology, which is to say, I was born with Saturn in Leo, and so for the rest of my life, I'm going to outpicture the qualities of Saturn in Leo. To some extent we will, but there's plasticity in that too. We can change that through our own will, and especially through spiritual practices, through prayer, through meditation, through service, through devotion. We can overcome the negative side of it and manifest more of the positive side of each of these planets. And the reason the planets are in these signs is because of something we have done in a past life. And in this life, we manifest that so that we can overcome that. So we can pay the debt that we made in a past life. And so when someone has a strong momentum with service, for example, you'll see that they might have good health. Because in astrology, service is the 6th house, which is also the house of health. And so when we're selfless, when we give, we might tend to have a better health, because that's also connected to Saturn in the 6th house. And so Saturn, when it's strong through service, through selflessness, through having overcome greed, we might enjoy better health. And so in astrology, we can see these esoteric connections between physical realities like one's health, or even one's size, whether one's skinny or fat or tall or short, through the planets and even through the momentums we have from past lives. And so this mythology, it draws this esoteric, macrocosmic perspective of the planets into something that is directly relatable from the perspective of a human being. As human beings, we can relate to these mythologies. And it makes it seem closer to us. And when we feel closer to the planets, we feel closer to ourselves, in our understanding of astrology at least, and our potential to overcome that. And that's why for thousands of years, at least, maybe more, these civilizations have had religions based on planets, which is to say a projection of the qualities of our own chakras onto planets. And so someone who had a lot of heart quality, a lot of Venus quality, might have been drawn to worshiping Aphrodite, or if we were in Rome, the goddess Venus. Or if someone had a strong athletic bent, a lot of fire, maybe a desire to be a warrior or a soldier, they would go worship Mars. And these are just ways of saying that God is multifaceted. He's not one person. God can't be embodied in one person. He's embodied in many different things. And so this pagan way of worshiping God was more natural, I think, to human beings, because we could worship that quality of God which we found the most attractive to us based on our own temperament, which drew us closer to God because we felt at ease worshiping God in that way which we were already in tune with. And so astrology is no different from all of that. It's taking these divine aspects found within the human body, manifested as the chakras, and it turns them into gods. Not because God is Aries and Aphrodite and Zeus, but because that's the channel through which we can relate to the divine. That's a channel through which the divine has this intermediary that seems almost human, that makes God doesn't seem so far off. Now, I'm not saying we have to return to that worship. I certainly don't worship those deities, but it's a way of understanding that astrology was much more than horoscopes back then. It was a way of understanding our karma, it was a way of understanding God, and it was a way of understanding how we could feel closer to God. And perhaps in the future we can do another video on mythology in different societies through history, because all these societies had different pantheons of gods based on the planets, and they all had very strong parallels, which is very interesting. You could say these civilizations with almost no contact in between each other, like India and Greece, or India and Egypt, had deities with very strong similarities, which in my opinion were based, well, they were certainly also associated with the planets, but were also associated with the chakras. So I'd be very interested to see what comments everyone has, and what sort of mythologies beyond the Greco-Roman mythology we could look at. But please comment below, let me know what you think, and we look forward to seeing you again at Odyssey Astrology.